What's the deal with NFTs? What are they? How do you create them? And why are people paying so much money to own an NFT? Well, I don't know the answer to that last question, but I can tell you what they are and I can show you how to create them on the Cardano blockchain. So what are NFTs? First of all, NFT stands for non-fungible token. And non-fungible tokens are units of data basically stored on a digital ledger or a blockchain, and they are unique and they are irreplaceable. So that's what the non-fungible stands for. It stands for irreplaceable, and by that definition they are automatically unique. So they are unique tokens stored on a blockchain, and they're usually used to represent some digital asset. This digital asset could be anything you can think of. It could be a document. Most of the time it's some form of digital art. And that's basically a short description of what an NFT is. NFTs in theory could be created on any blockchain that has multi-asset support, which means it can track the ownership and transfer of tokens or assets other than its principal token or principal currency. So for example, that principal currency or token on the Cardano network is ADA. So if a blockchain supports transfers of more than one type of token, then NFT creation on that blockchain should be possible. If a blockchain does support multiple assets, then this support can be either native or non-native. Native support means that this functionality of tracking of the ownership and transfer of tokens is built into the ledger. So for example, the Cardano network has native support for assets, and that means that they are tracked and sent the same way as its principal currency, ADA. The only difference is that only ADA tokens can be used to pay transaction fees, make deposits, and earn rewards from staking. Non-native support for multiple assets means that this functionality doesn't come from the ledger itself, but is handled with layer 2 solutions through smart contracts. So for example, the Ethereum network has multi-asset support, which is non-native, so it's handled through smart contracts. And to do anything with custom tokens or NFTs on the Ethereum network, you need to pay gas fees associated with the execution of smart contracts. So that's why you probably hear users complaining about the high costs of creating and sending NFTs on the Ethereum network. So with that said, I would say that creating an NFT on Cardano is simpler, cheaper, and more secure than on Ethereum. It's simpler because you don't need to write a smart contract to create and send NFTs. It's cheaper because you don't need to pay the gas fees associated with smart contracts for creating and sending NFTs. And it's more secure because the ledger takes care of the token logic, right? So the element of human error is taken away, while on the Ethereum you have smart contract code which can be vulnerable to bugs and security issues. So to create an NFT, we'll first need to know how native assets work on Cardano. So in general, if you want to learn about native tokens on Cardano, I suggest you take a look at this Cardano documentation. I will put all the links in the description. So for now, we want to know what a native token has on Cardano. So an asset is uniquely identified by the asset ID, which is a pair of both the policy ID and asset name. So asset ID is the highest level identification for a token, so it contains both the policy ID and the asset name. The policy ID comes from the minting policy itself. So we'll look at the minting policy in just a second, but it's important to know that this policy ID is simply the hash of the policy itself, so the minting policy. So an example of the policy ID is just going to be a hash, a series of letters and numbers. The asset name, however, is the name that we give it, so we can give it a human descriptive name, like for example tickets here, and the combination of the policy ID and the asset name is going to give us the asset ID, which is sort of the final identification of the token. And now let's take a look at the minting policy. So this is what we hash to get the policy ID. And the minting policy sets out rules for governing the minting and burning of tokens. So, for example, who can do it, when can they do it, and so on. And we have some examples here of minting policies, such as single issuer, time locked, and one-time mint policy. The single issuer is simply a policy that allows a single individual or a group to handle the minting and burning of tokens. The time-locked policy is actually what we'll be using, and it means that the tokens can be minted or burned before. Well, you could specify after, we'll use before, and we'll say this token can be only minted before a certain slot. And after that, the token is locked and it cannot be minted again, ever. And this cannot change, it's permanently locked, and that's how we'll ensure that we actually have an NFT. So we will mint only one token and wait for the policy to lock the token so that no more mints can happen. But we'll look at that later in more detail. And the one-time minting policy is actually what we would want for an NFT. However, we cannot use this yet because we would need a smart contract to do this. This would allow us to specify a policy that that says this token can only be minted once in this one transaction, and that's it. It's never going to get minted again, which is, you know, similar to our time-locked minting policy approach, but it's of course better because you are absolutely certain that it will be minted only once and that's it. While in the time-locked policy, in general, you could mint as many as you want before that certain slot, but it's still a good enough method to create NFTs on Cardano. So those are the parts of a native asset on the Cardano blockchain, and with that I think we're ready to go into the terminal and start using the Cardano CLI to create our NFT. So I'm here in the terminal. I'm using Cardano CLI version 1.27.0, recently released. And the first thing we're going to need for creating an NFT is some digital asset that we're actually creating the NFT from. So in my case, this is the Scully image. I can show it to you here. So it's an image of a skull. It's a beautiful piece of art in the digital form. Scully 001 by Garden Pool. That's going to be the NFT. Okay, so now we need a way to make this image available to everyone who wants to look at it. And we could make it available on some HTTP site, like I could put it on my website, for example. And then the path to that image would, for example, end in myimage.png. But in that case, you don't really know that. I mean, that path can show you this image, but I could replace that path with another image and it will show something completely different than what the original NFT was supposed to be. So HTTP, not a really good way of representing NFTs because they can change. However, there is the IPFS, which is the interplanetary file system, and we're going to be using that to host our image, and that way we know that what we upload there is never going to change. Well, the representation of what we upload is never going to change, so that's why we'll be using that. And we will be using the Blockfrost API. So this is brought to you by 5binaries. It's a really good API system for Cardano. It has everything, and it includes not just Cardano APIs but also the IPFS. So we'll be using their API to upload our image to the IPFS system. So let's do that first. To do that, we'll need to sign up and get our project ID and then upload it. So I am already in here and I have my project name, which is the NFT guide, and here I get my API key, which is sort of the project ID in the API documentation. So let's have a look at that. Opening up the documentation, and we are interested in the IPFS. So first is to add. We will need to add the whatever file we want to upload, and here is the syntax for this API call. So we add this file to the IPFS, but that's alone not enough because we need to pin it. So when we pin it, we look at pins, and when we pin it, it means that Blockfrost will pin this to their IPFS nodes, and it will always be available. They will always host this file. So we'll need to do two requests, one for adding it and one for pinning it. If it's not pinned and it's not accessed in a long time, it will be garbage collected, and yeah, we don't want that because we want it to be accessible at all times. So let's upload that to IPFS using Blockfrost API through our terminal. So first I got the project ID, and now I want to copy this API call for adding it, and I'll just replace the project ID with my project ID, and the file name I need to replace with my file name. So if we copy this to the terminal, we should be able to get a response back, IPFS hash. So we have the hash of this file now, and we will be able to access this file on the IPFS through this hash forever. We will save the, let's call it art hash, and we will remove the quotes. Okay, and now we want to pin it as well. So we'll get the command for pinning it. So now it's, I didn't copy that, a slightly different request, but we can just copy this, and then instead of this IPFS add, we'll have IPFS pin add, and then the IPFS path, which is the hash of our image that we got from the last call. So we got that, we post it, and we have our project ID, and we don't need the file anymore. We just want this request to pin it, and we send it, and we get back it's queued, and that's okay. We need to wait a little bit for it to be actually pinned, but we have sent the request and everything works okay. So that part is done. We will shortly have a pinned image on the IPFS, and we will use that uh, location for our NFT. So with that, we can get into the Cardano CLI stuff for creating the NFT. Before we start, I should mention you will need some ADA to cover the transaction fees for the minting transaction. But other than that, we can start. What we want first is what we want is the policy ID. To get the policy ID, we need to create the minting script, and then if we hash the minting script, we get the policy ID. But to create the minting script, we also want a key hash in there that will say only transactions signed with this key can actually mint the token, and that's going to be our key that we're going to create. So let's start with creating this new key pair for controlling the token, and move from there. So what I want to do first is just create a new directory where I'll put the keys for this token, and I'll just copy the command for Cardano address key again. So this will be the key pair that controls the token. It has to sign the transaction for the minting for it to work. But of course, we first need to specify that in the minting script. Let's just create this. We have the policy S key and V key now. We need to hash that verification key. So we will key hash the verification key for the policy, and that will give us the hash that we will put in the minting script, so the script knows only this key can mint or burn the tokens. So we're going to save that hash, and now we want to create the policy, the scripting policy. So we'll just do nanopolicy.script to create that file. And I'm just going to put here an example of the script for an NFT, really, on Cardano. So we have the key hash. This is where we want to put our own key hash, and this means that the asset is controlled by this key, well, the key that has this hash. And here we also add the before. So it means it's only mintable before a certain slot, and we want to put in a certain slot here that's not too far in the future, so that we can mint one token before the slot, and then let the slot expire, and after that we know nobody can mint, not even with this key. Nobody can mint. So that's when we know we have an NFT. And so we'll just look up, we'll use the Cardano CLI query tip on mainnet. And if you are playing around with NFTs, please do it on the testnet. I suggest you do it on testnet because first of all, you can get free ADA there and you can practice and everything. The only reason I'm doing this on mainnet is because I actually want to use this NFT later on, and I know what I'm doing, but I of course played on the testnet before this. So I'm gonna copy this in, and I'm gonna get the current tip for the mainnet, and I can work off of that. So you can give yourself an hour or whatever you want. You can specify a slot here after which minting won't work anymore. So let's say I'll just increase this by 4. That should give me enough time to mint one token before this slot expires. Okay, so I can put that in here, not the tip, but remember this was 3, so this is the tip, but let's write it out. So this is the tip, and before will be, so this number here, so an increased number. Okay, this looks like an okay script now, so we can do policy.script and paste this in, and we have our key hash here. We specified the slot until which minting can take place and after which it cannot, and we will save this. So that's creating the script. We know that the policy ID, the thing that we actually want to get, is just the hash of the policy script. So we just need to do Cardano CLI transaction policy ID, and script file is policy.script, and we will put it into policy.id. So we have the policy ID here. Policy ID is this. Okay, we got the policy ID now from the script, and now we want to create some metadata for the minting transaction. This is our way of linking the metadata to the token, so that we can say, this token represents this digital asset, this image, or whatever. But you can look at the CIP from Alessandro from Berrypool. Also, Smog from pool.pm is listed as an author here, and they have an NFT metadata standard. So we will be following that in this video, but we don't have currently a working wallet on the mainnet for displaying NFTs in the wallet, the art at least. So pool.pm, however, does. If you follow this convention, then you can show your token on pool.pm. So we're gonna create the NFT meta JSON, and following this convention, I just took out. I left the name and image, and this sort of description type and any other properties I don't care about right now, so I just want this, and this is the short version of it. So we have 721, which is the label for this NFT metadata type, and this is our policy ID. This is the asset name. This is the human readable name, and the image is our link to the IPFS. I mean, it contains our hash, so this is our way of saying, this token represents this art. NFT meta JSON, and just fix the formatting a little bit. So we have the policy ID, and here is the asset name. So as it is on, if you remember, the asset ID is the combination of policy ID and asset name, and this is just the name we want to give. So that, and this is the image, and that looks okay. So yeah, that's the metadata created, and we can now start the minting process to actually mint this token with the metadata attached. So to make the minting transaction, we first need the protocol parameters that are going to be used to calculate the minimum fee. So we just query that through Cardano CLI, and now we have that protocol JSON. As I said, you will need some ADA, so we will query the UTXO. I'm going to query my address right here to get my balance, which is like 2.5 ADA. It's enough. So balance is going to be this, and the TX in, so the transaction output that we'll use as input for the minting transaction is going to be this, and this is hashtag index, so index is 0, and yeah, we are ready to build the raw transaction that's going to be used to calculate the mint fees. So we just replace this TX in, and TX out is going to be the base address plus this balance that we're getting back. And now this is the syntax for minting. So first is the address, and then plus the amount of ADA that goes back to this address, then plus any token. And the token is specified with 1, the number of how many we want to send, and then we are printing out the policy ID here, dot the asset name, so Scali 001 as we put in the metadata. And we also have to say that we are actually minting one of these that we are sending. So we also have the mint specified here, and this parameter is new in Cardano node 1.27.0, which is that the minting script file must be in the transaction body here. So we include the script file, and we attach the metadata JSON, and we say it's invalid here after the same slot that we specified in the script. And we can create this raw transaction that we can then use to calculate the minimum fee. This is going to be the calculate minimum fee. We have the transaction body, TX in count is 1, TXX count is 1, witness count is 2, because we're using one address to pay for the fees, and the script verification key, we'll need to sign it with that to say, you know, we're allowed to mint this token. And we can calculate the minimum fee here, 19147. So this is the min fee, which means that the change that we need to calculate to get back is our balance minus this, and we can do an expression here to get back the change. And now we have everything to build the actual transaction, so we can just copy this again, only this time we know that the fee field is not 0, it's this, and the change is not the full thing but only part of it. And that's it. We can copy this, replace the raw transaction file, and we can sign it. So I'll just copy the template for signing Cardano CLI transaction sign. The signing key file is first of all the payment key that's used for the transaction fees, and also the signing key file for policy S key, so that this allows us to mint this token. We're doing it on mainnet, and the raw file is input, the out file is the signed transaction. We sign it, and we can submit it with Cardano CLI transaction submit. and the transaction is submitted successfully. With that, our NFT should be created, although it's not an NFT yet. Don't forget, if we do Cardano CLI query tip on mainnet, we can see that the current slot is 29535, and we are looking for 29541. So until this slot, we can make or burn tokens as we want, but after this one, we won't be able to do it. So now we just have to sit tight until this slot has passed, and then we know we can verify that there is only one of this token, one of this asset ID, and none. It cannot be created, minted, or burned anymore. So it's unique. It's really an NFT. So we can also check the status of our IPFS. Well, the status on the Blockfrost nodes for IPFS, since if you remember, we pinned it, but it was queued, so we were waiting for it to be pinned. Now we can use this API call for the pin list to see what's listed on our project ID, and we can check that. So you see there's actually two responses here. This is the first one, and this is the second one. The first one is from when I was playing on the testnet. So this second one is actually our hash, and we see that the state is pinned, so it's not going to be garbage collected, and we know it's going to be available. So that's just checking the Blockfrost IPFS. And as I mentioned before, pool.pm should be able to display our NFT now, because we can go to pool.pm, and then on the menu here we have tokens, and we can look for our token. So we minted it recently, and we should find it somewhere here. 5 minutes ago. Okay, there we go, Scully, and this is our NFT. Look at this beautiful thing. We can check the policy. So it has a question mark here. It has a policy, but it doesn't really know what this policy is. So I think we can give them our script. We can give them our script. They can hash it and verify that this script results in that policy ID, and they can verify it. So we register the policy, and yeah, they say it will be locked in about 30 minutes here. So that's when there will be no more minting or burning. But right now, I mean, only I can mint or burn it, so I know I'm not gonna mint or burn anything. But yeah, when you look at this, when you go here and find the Scully token, this slot will have passed, and then this policy will show it's locked. Okay, it cannot be minted or burned. So that's it. We have our NFT here, and it looks beautiful. I mean, it's so beautiful that I think I even understand why people are using so much money to buy NFTs. I mean, look at this. This NFT alone could easily be worth $1 million. Easy. I mean, look at it. It's Scully 001. Okay, the first Scully ever. I mean, that's worth money. But anyway, you don't need to pay me $1 million to get this. I'm gonna be giving this NFT away. So all you have to do is like and retweet the tweet of the video on Twitter, and in 24 hours I'll be ending the contest and picking a random winner who shared and retweeted, who retweeted and liked the Twitter post, and he or she will get the NFT. So thanks for watching, and I hope I hope you have fun playing with your NFTs.